The ship came out of faster-than-light travel with a soft hum. Captain Sunho stood at the bridge window and looked at the planet below. It was beautiful. Purple clouds moved across green oceans. Cities made of silver and gold covered the land like glowing nets. This was Aelthora, the capital world of the Velthari Dominion. Sunho had seen many things in his 50 years of life. He had watched Earth's first colony ships leave for Mars. He had been there when humans discovered the ancient vessel buried in Antarctic ice, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. First contact with an alien empire that ruled 300 star systems. "Sir, they are hailing us," said the communications officer. Sunho nodded, "Put it through." A face appeared on the screen. It was not human. The creature had silver skin that seemed to glow from within. Its eyes were large and completely black like pools of ink. It had no nose, only two small slits. When it spoke, its voice was cold and musical at the same time. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered Velthari space. State your purpose or be destroyed." Sunho kept his voice calm. "This is the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge. We come in peace. We request an audience with your leaders to discuss friendship between our peoples." There was a long pause. Then the alien made a sound. It took Sunho a moment to realize it was laughing. "Friendship," the alien repeated. "How amusing. Hold your position. A decision will be made about whether you are worth our time." The screen went dark. Sunho turned to look at his crew. They were all watching him with worried eyes. He gave them a small smile. "Well," he said, "at least they did not shoot us immediately." 3 hours later, a small shuttle carried the human delegation down to the planet's surface. Dohan sat quietly, reviewing his notes for the 100th time. He was the lead diplomat, chosen by Earth's unified government to represent all of humanity. It was the heaviest responsibility anyone had ever carried. Beside him sat Yuna. She was a xenolinguist, which meant she studied alien languages. But there had been no alien languages to study until now. So instead, she had spent her life studying the strange symbols found in the Antarctic ship. The ship that had changed everything humans believed about their place in the universe. Yuna was small and quiet. She rarely spoke unless she had something important to say. Right now, she was looking out the window at the alien city growing larger below them. Her eyes moved quickly, taking in every detail. Tiho sat across from them. He was the military advisor, a tall man with a serious face. His hand rested near his sidearm, though he knew it would be useless against an empire that could destroy planets. Some habits were hard to break. Next to Tiho was Hana, the team's historian and archaeologist. She had been the first person to enter the ancient Antarctic ship. She had touched walls that were older than human civilization. Now she was about to walk into an alien palace. The shuttle landed on a platform made of white stone. Soldiers waited for them. The Velthari were tall, almost 2 meters in height. Their bodies were thin and elegant. They wore armor that looked like liquid silver, and they held weapons that hummed with energy. The soldiers did not speak. They simply gestured for the humans to follow. Dohan walked first, his head held high. He had been trained for difficult negotiations. He had faced hostile governments and angry crowds, but nothing compared to walking through corridors filled with beings who looked at humans the way humans might look at insects. The palace was enormous. The ceilings were so high they disappeared into shadow. Pillars of dark stone rose on every side, covered in strange symbols that seemed to move when Dohan was not looking directly at them. Everything was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. It was working. They entered a massive chamber. At the far end, on a throne made of crystal, sat a Velthari who radiated power. This was High Sovereign Orith, ruler of 300 worlds. Around him stood nobles and advisors, all wearing robes of deep blue and purple. And they were all laughing. The sound filled the chamber. It echoed off the walls and ceiling. It was not friendly laughter. It was the laughter of those who found something beneath them amusing. A Velthari in military armor stepped forward. His name was Commander Vishu, and his face showed open contempt. "These are the visitors," he said loudly. "These small, soft creatures. They look like they would break if I touched them." More laughter. "Look at their skin," another noble said. "So many different colors, like they cannot decide what they want to be." "And so short," Vishu continued. "How do they reach anything? Do they climb on each other?" The laughter grew louder. Dohan felt heat rise to his face, but he kept his expression neutral. Behind him, Tiho's jaw tightened with anger. High Sovereign Orith raised one long hand. The chamber fell silent immediately. "So," Orith said, his voice smooth as silk, "the Mudwalkers have finally crawled out of their little world. How long has your species existed? A few 100,000 years." He smiled, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. Your entire history is a footnote in ours." Dohan stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "High Sovereign, we come with humble hearts and open hands. We seek only friendship and understanding between our peoples. We have much to learn from the great Velthari Dominion." Orith tilted his head, studying Dohan like a scientist might study a new species of beetle. "Friendship," he repeated. "What could you possibly offer us? You have no technology we need, no resources we cannot take, no knowledge we do not already possess. You are children playing in the shadows of giants." "We offer good faith," Dohan said. "We offer our willingness to learn and grow. We offer the fresh perspective of a young species." Commander Vishu laughed again. "Fresh perspective. What perspective can Mudwalkers offer to those who have seen stars born and die?" An elderly Velthari in dark robes sat apart from the others. This was Elder Keth, keeper of sacred texts and ancient wisdom. Unlike the others, he did not laugh. He watched the humans with an expression that was difficult to read. His eyes lingered on Yuna, who stood silently at the back of the delegation. Yuna was not looking at the throne. She was looking at the pillars, at the symbols carved into them. Her lips moved slightly as if she was reading something. Her eyes grew wider with each passing moment. Elder Keth noticed. He leaned forward in his seat, suddenly very interested. Orith waved his hand dismissively. "We have heard enough. The Dominion has decided. Humanity will be granted protected species status. You will be allowed to exist within our borders as long as you cause no trouble. Think of it as a kindness. We do not destroy endangered creatures." The court erupted in fresh laughter. Dohan felt the words like a slap. Protected species. They were being treated like animals in a preserve. Everything humanity had achieved, every struggle and triumph reduced to nothing. "The audience is over," Orith declared. "Return to your ship, be grateful for our mercy." The humans were dismissed. The laughter followed them out of the chamber. But Yuna paused at the doorway. She turned and looked back at the ancient pillars one more time. Her heart was beating fast. Her mind was racing faster. She knew those symbols. She had seen them before, not here, not on this world. She had seen them in the ice, carved into walls that were older than human memory. And suddenly, everything changed. The human delegation did not leave. Dohan requested a formal hearing, a proper chance to present their case. To everyone's surprise, High Sovereign Orith agreed, but his reasons were not kind. "Let them speak," Orith had said to his advisors. "The court needs entertainment. What better amusement than watching primitives try to convince us of their worth?" So the next day, the humans returned to the Grand Chamber of Voices. This time, the room was full. Hundreds of Velthari nobles had gathered to watch the show. They whispered to each other behind long fingers, their black eyes shining with cruel anticipation. Dohan stood in the center of the chamber. Above him, the high ceiling seemed to press down like a weight. Behind him, his team waited in silence. Yuna had not slept the night before. She had spent hours staring at the images she had captured of the symbols on the pillars, comparing them, translating them. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face showed nothing. Orith sat on his crystal throne, looking bored already. Elder Keth sat nearby, his ancient eyes never leaving the human woman with the quiet face. Commander Vishu stood with his soldiers, arms crossed, a permanent smirk on his silver features. "You may speak, Mudwalker," Orith said. "Convince us why we should care about your little species." Dohun took a breath. He had prepared this speech for months. Every word had been chosen carefully. He knew it might be the most important speech in human history. "High Sovereign, honored members of the Dominion," he began. "Humanity is young. You are right about this. We have only recently stepped beyond our own world. We have much to learn about the universe and our place in it." Vishu yawned loudly. A few nobles laughed. Dohun continued, keeping his voice steady. "But youth is not weakness. A young tree may be small, but it has deep roots and endless potential. We come to you not as conquerors or rivals. We come as students, as partners, as friends waiting to be made." "Friends," a noble repeated mockingly. "Do you keep friends who live in the dirt? Do you invite insects to your dinner table?" Laughter rippled through the chamber. "We offer cooperation," Dohun pressed on. "We offer the exchange of culture and ideas. Every species sees the universe differently. Surely even the great Velthari can find value in new perspectives." High Sovereign Orith leaned forward slightly. His smile was cold. "New perspectives. Let me tell you about perspectives, little human. The Velthari have traveled to the edges of the known universe. We have mapped stars that your kind cannot even see. We have developed technology that would seem like magic to your primitive minds. What perspective could you possibly offer that we have not already discovered and discarded?" Dohun swallowed. "Perhaps we could offer our determination, our creativity, our ability to survive against all odds." "Survival?" Vishu stepped forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "You call existing on one small rock for a few thousand years survival? The Velthari have survived the death of suns. We have endured wars that lasted longer than your entire civilization. Your survival means nothing to us." The chamber filled with approving murmurs. Orith raised his hand for silence. "I will tell you what will happen, human. You will return to your Earth. You will stay there quietly. When we need something from your system, we will take it. When we want to study you, we will come and observe. You will not expand beyond your current territories without our permission. This is not negotiable." Dohun felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was not a negotiation. This was a sentence. "And what if we refuse?" The words came from Tiho before he could stop them. Every eye in the chamber turned to the human soldier. Vishu's smirk widened into something dangerous. "Refuse?" Orith laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "You do not understand your position. If you refuse, we will simply remove your species from the universe. Not out of anger, not out of hate. We would do it the way you might remove weeds from a garden, without thought, without effort. You exist because we allow it. Remember that." The silence that followed was absolute. Dohun wanted to respond. He wanted to find words that would change everything. But what could he say? The Velthari were not bluffing. They had the power to do exactly what they threatened. One empire against one planet was no contest at all. A noble in the crowd called out, "Perhaps we should keep some of them as pets. The small ones are almost cute." Another voice joined in. "Or put them in preserves. We could visit and watch them in their natural habitat. Maybe they could perform for us, do tricks." The mockery came from all sides now. Hundreds of voices laughing, suggesting degrading fates for all of humanity. Dohun stood frozen, his face burning with shame and rage. Behind him, Hana grabbed Tiho's arm. The soldier was shaking with anger, his hand reaching for his weapon. "No," she whispered fiercely. "It would not help. It would give them an excuse." Tiho stopped, but his eyes were dark with fury. Through it all, Una remained still. She was not listening to the mockery. She was looking at Elder Keth. The old priest had not joined the laughter. He was watching her with an intensity that felt almost desperate. Their eyes met across the chamber. Una saw something in his gaze. Recognition, fear, hope. She was not sure, but in that moment she made a decision. She stepped forward, moving past Dohun. Una, what are you doing? Hana hissed. Una did not answer. She walked until she stood in the very center of the chamber, directly below the throne. The laughter began to fade as the Velthari noticed the small human woman standing alone, seemingly unafraid. Orith looked down at her with amusement. Does another Mudwalker wish to speak? By all means, entertain us. Una's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her mouth was dry. Her hands were cold. But she had spent 20 years of her life preparing for this moment, even though she had not known it. You laugh at us, she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silent chamber it carried clearly. You call us primitives, you say we know nothing. Because it is true, Vashu said, grinning. Una nodded slowly. Perhaps. We are young, we are small, we have much to learn. She paused. But I wonder, High Sovereign, how much have you forgotten? A murmur ran through the crowd. Orith's eyes narrowed. Forgotten. The Velthari forget nothing. Our memories are perfect. Our records span 12,000 years. 12,000 years, Una repeated. A long time, long enough for languages to die, for old words to become sacred mysteries that no one speaks anymore. Elder Keth rose from his seat. His face had gone pale. Una turned to look at the ancient pillars, at the symbols carved there, the old script, the sacred language of the Velthari's ancestors, dead for 8,000 years. Those symbols, she said, pointing, you cannot read them anymore. You know they are holy, but you do not know what they say. You have priests who protect them, but even your priests only know fragments. The true meaning was lost long ago. The chamber was utterly silent now. No one was laughing. How do you know about the old script? Orith demanded. His voice had lost its smoothness. There was an edge of fear in it now. Una turned back to face the throne. She took a deep breath. And then she began to speak. But the words that came from her mouth were not human words. They were not the common Velthari language. They were something older, something that had not been spoken aloud in this chamber for thousands upon thousands of years. The sounds were strange and beautiful. They rolled off her tongue like ancient music, like the voice of stars themselves. Every Velthari in the room felt them like electricity in their blood, like memories of things they had never experienced but somehow knew. Elder Keth collapsed back into his seat, tears streaming down his silver face. Commander Vashu's smirk had vanished completely. He looked like someone who had seen a ghost. And High Sovereign Orith, ruler of 300 worlds, sat on his crystal throne with an expression of pure, absolute shock. The small human woman from the insignificant planet had just spoken in the voice of his own ancestors. The silence in the grand chamber was so complete that Una could hear her own heartbeat. Every Velthari in the room had frozen like statues. Their black eyes were wide. Their silver faces showed emotions that ranged from shock to terror to something that looked almost like pain. Una continued to speak the ancient words. Each sound came from somewhere deep inside her, from years of study and sleepless nights, and a burning need to understand. The language flowed from her lips like water from a spring that had been blocked for far too long. She spoke the opening lines of the Book of First Wandering, the Velthari's most sacred text, words that even their highest priests could only read, never pronounce, words that had not been heard aloud for 8,000 years. Kethfulur on Sorenthes, Vorakith Nethori Von. The translation echoed in her mind as she spoke. We who walk between stars remember. The children of the wanderers have returned. Elder Keth was weeping openly now. The ancient priest had dedicated his entire life to the sacred texts. He had memorized every symbol, studied every fragment, but he had never heard them spoken. He had never known what they truly sounded like. And now, a creature from a primitive world was speaking them perfectly. High Sovereign Orith finally found his voice. "Stop," he commanded, but his voice shook. "Stop speaking those words. How dare you? This is forbidden. This is sacred." Yuna stopped. She looked up at the throne with calm eyes. "Sacred," she repeated. "Yes, these words are sacred. They tell the story of your people's beginning. They speak of the first wanderers who traveled across the stars, seeding life on countless worlds. They describe the great mission, the spreading of consciousness throughout the universe." "You cannot know this," Orith said. His hands gripped the arms of his crystal throne so tightly that his silver knuckles had turned white. "No alien can know this. The old script is ours alone." "It was yours," Yuna agreed. "And then you forgot it. You let it become a mystery, a relic, a collection of pretty symbols that no one understood. Your own history became a decoration." Commander Vishu stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "She is lying. She must have stolen our texts somehow. This is an attack, a trick." "An attack?" Yuna shook her head slowly. "Commander, if I wanted to attack you, would I come with 4 people to face an empire? Would I use words instead of weapons?" She gestured to herself. "Look at me. I am small. I am weak by your standards, but I carry something more powerful than any weapon. I carry memory." "Impossible," Vishu insisted, but his voice lacked conviction now. Yuna turned to look at Elder Keth. The old priest was staring at her with desperate intensity, as if she held the answer to every question he had ever asked. "Elder," she said gently, "you know I am speaking the truth. You can feel it in your bones. The old words call to something inside you, something your people have forgotten but never truly lost. Tell your sovereign. Tell him what you hear in my voice." Keth stood on trembling legs. He walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, toward Yuna. The other Velthari watched in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one breathed. Keth stopped before Yuna. He was so much taller than her, but in that moment he seemed small. He reached out with one long hand and gently touched her face, as if to make sure she was real. "The pronunciation," he whispered. "It is perfect, not learned from books, not guessed from symbols. This is how the words were meant to sound. This is the true voice of the ancients." He turned to face Orith. "My sovereign, she speaks the truth. No thief could fake this. No scholar could reconstruct it. She knows our language because—" He could not finish the sentence. It was too enormous. Yuna finished it for him. "Because humans learned it from the same source. The first wanderers did not only create the Velthari, they seeded many worlds. Earth was one of them." The words hit the chamber like a physical force. Nobles stumbled backward. Some cried out in denial. Others simply stared, their minds struggling to process what they were hearing. "You lie," Orith said, but it sounded more like a prayer than an accusation. "The Velthari are unique. We are the chosen children of the first wanderers. Our sacred texts say nothing about other children." "Your sacred texts say exactly that," Yuna replied. "You simply forgot how to read them." She closed her eyes and spoke again in the ancient language, then translated. "The seeds are scattered to the far winds. Some will grow quickly. Some will sleep for ages, but all are family. All will remember. And one day when the stars are right, the lost children will return home." Hana stepped forward now, standing beside Yuna. The historian's voice was steady despite the enormity of the moment. 40 years ago, human scientists discovered a ship buried under the ice of our southern continent. It was ancient, older than anything in human history. Inside, we found records, star maps, genetic samples, and linguistic databases. She looked around the chamber at the stunned Velthari faces. The ship had been there for over 100,000 years. The beings who left it there seeded our world with life, then disappeared. They left only one thing behind, a gift for the children they would never meet. They left their language, their history, their memory. We spent decades studying that ship. Yuna continued. I spent my entire adult life learning the language it contained. At first, we did not understand why. We had no other species to communicate with. It seemed like a dead language with no purpose. She smiled softly. Then we developed faster-than-light travel. We came here, and I saw your pillars. I saw your sacred symbols. And I realized that the language of our ancestors and the language of your ancestors were the same, because our ancestors and your ancestors were the same. Orith stood from his throne. His legs seemed unsteady. This cannot be. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We are the masters of known space. How can we be related to mudwalkers? Dohan stepped forward, his voice carefully neutral. To primitives, to creatures you wanted to keep as pets. He let the words hang in the air. High Sovereign, we did not come here to humiliate you. We did not come to take anything from you. We came because we finally understood what the ancient ship was trying to tell us. We were not meant to be alone. We were meant to find our family. Commander Vishu's face had turned dark with anger. This is a trick, a manipulation. They want to steal our heritage, claim our history as their own. What would we gain from that? Tiho asked. His voice was hard but controlled. We already have your language. We already have the knowledge. If we wanted to, we could have kept it secret, used it against you somehow. Instead, we brought it to you freely. We offered it as a gift. Elder Keth turned to face the assembly. His voice rang through the chamber with an authority that came from centuries of devotion to sacred truth. The texts speak of this moment. I have read the passages 1,000 times without understanding. They speak of children who would sleep for ages, who would forget their origins, who would grow in isolation. They speak of a reunion that would change everything. He pointed at Yuna. This woman carries the voice of our ancestors in her throat. This is not something that can be faked or stolen. The first wanderers gave this gift to her people just as they gave it to ours. To deny this is to deny our own sacred texts. The chamber erupted in chaos. Voices shouted over each other. Some demanded proof. Others called for the humans to be arrested. A few simply stood in stunned silence, their entire understanding of the universe crumbling around them. Through it all, Yuna remained calm. She had done what she came to do. She had spoken the words that had been waiting inside her for 20 years. Whatever happened next was beyond her control. High Sovereign Orith raised both hands. Slowly, painfully, the chamber fell silent. He looked at Yuna with eyes that held 1,000 emotions. Fear, doubt, anger, but underneath it all there was something else. Something that looked almost like hope. If what you say is true, he said slowly, then everything we believe about ourselves is wrong. We are not unique. We are not chosen. We are simply one branch of a very old tree. Yuna nodded. Yes, but that does not make you less. It makes you more. It means you are not alone in the universe. It means there is family waiting for you among the stars. Is that really so terrible? Orith did not answer. He simply stared at the small human woman who had just changed the course of galactic history with nothing but her voice and the truth. The dead had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same. The chamber had emptied. The nobles had fled to their estates, desperate to process what they had witnessed. Only a handful of figures remained in the vast space. High Sovereign Orith sat heavily on his throne, looking older than he had just hours before. Elder Keth stood nearby, his ancient face still wet with tears he had not bothered to wipe away. Commander Vishu paced like a caged animal, refusing to accept what he had heard. And in the center stood the human delegation, 5 small figures who had just turned an empire upside down. I want proof, Orith finally said. His voice was hollow, stripped of its earlier arrogance. Words are powerful, but I need to see evidence, real evidence. Dohan nodded. We expected that, High Sovereign. We brought records with us. Complete data files from the Antarctic ship, star charts, genetic analyses. Everything we discovered is yours to examine. That could be fabricated, Vishu insisted. They could have created false records. Hana shook her head. The dating methods are verifiable. The materials in the ship match nothing found naturally on Earth. The genetic markers in the stored samples can be compared directly to Velthari DNA. You do not need to trust our words, Commander. You only need to look at the evidence. Elder Keth stepped forward. There is something else, something that would prove the truth beyond any doubt. He turned to Orith with a mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. My sovereign, beneath this very chamber lies the Chamber of Origins. It has been sealed for 6,000 years since the Great Forgetting. Only the highest priests know it exists. Even I have never been inside. Orith's expression darkened. The Chamber of Origins is forbidden. The seals were placed there for a reason. The seals were placed there because we were afraid, Keth replied. Afraid of what we might find. Afraid that our understanding of ourselves was incomplete. He gestured toward Yuna. These humans have already shown us that our fears were justified. The question now is whether we continue to hide from the truth or finally face it. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Orith sat motionless, wrestling with a decision that would change everything. Finally he spoke, opened the chamber. The journey downward took nearly an hour. They descended through passages that grew older and rougher as they went. The polished stones of the palace gave way to ancient rock, carved by tools that no longer existed. Strange symbols covered the walls, symbols that even Keth could not read. But Yuna could. They are directions, she said softly as they walked. Instructions for those who come after, welcome messages and warnings. Warnings about what? Tiho asked, his hand resting on his weapon from habit. About forgetting, Yuna replied. About letting the past become a mystery. They knew this would happen. They knew that time erodes memory. So they left these messages, hoping someone would eventually remember how to read them. They reached a massive door made of a metal that seemed to absorb light. Symbols covered its surface in spiraling patterns. Keth approached and began pressing certain symbols in sequence, a code passed down through generations of priests who no longer understood its meaning. The door opened with a sound like a sigh, releasing air that had been sealed inside for 6,000 years. Beyond was darkness. Then slowly, lights began to activate, ancient lights that still worked after all this time. They revealed a chamber that made everyone, human and Velthari alike, gasp in wonder. It was enormous. The ceiling rose so high it disappeared into shadow, and covering every surface were records, physical tablets, crystalline storage devices, holographic displays that flickered to life as the group entered. But that was not what made them gasp. In the center of the chamber stood a statue. It was made of the same light-absorbing metal as the door. It depicted a figure that was neither Velthari nor human, but somehow both. It had the height of a Velthari, but its proportions were different. Its face showed features that could have belonged to either species or to neither. And at its base, carved in the old script, were words that Yuna translated aloud. We are the first wanderers. We came from a world that no longer exists. We seeded life across the universe so that our children might continue where we could not. Remember us. Find each other. Be family. Orith fell to his knees. The High Sovereign of 300 worlds knelt before a statue of his true ancestors, overwhelmed by the weight of revelation. Hana moved toward the crystalline storage devices. Her hands trembled as she activated one. A hologram appeared showing star maps, hundreds of worlds marked with symbols. She recognized one immediately. Earth, she breathed. Look, Earth is marked. We are on their map. More holograms activated. Records of the seeding program. Lists of worlds where life had been planted. Predictions about how each species might develop. And a timeline showing when each world was seeded. Earth was seeded first, Hana said, her voice shaking. Over 100,000 years ago. Aelthora was seeded later, only 80,000 years ago. The Velthari are actually younger than humans. That cannot be, Vishu growled. We are far more advanced. You developed faster, Yuna said gently. The records explain why. Earth's conditions were harsher, development was slower, but both species were created from the same source with the same potential. You simply had more time to grow. Elder Keth was examining another set of records. His face had gone very pale. There is more. The records mention a catastrophe, something that struck the first wanderers when they were still active in this region of space, a disaster that forced them to accelerate their program and then disappear. What kind of disaster? Dohan asked. Keth shook his head. The records are incomplete, but it seems they knew they would not survive, so they did everything they could to ensure their children would. They left ships hidden on various worlds. They left language databases. They left us. Orith finally stood. He walked slowly toward the statue, reaching out to touch the cold metal. His fingers traced the face of the first wanderer, the true ancestor of both his people and the humans standing behind him. We forgot everything, he said softly. We forgot where we came from. We forgot that we had siblings among the stars. We grew proud and cruel, looking down on younger species because we could not remember that we were all family. He turned to face the humans. We laughed at you. We called you mudwalkers. We threatened to destroy you like weeds. Dohan met his gaze steadily. Yes, you did. Orith bowed his head. It was a gesture that no human had ever seen a Velthari make. I am sorry. On behalf of my people, I am sorry. We did not know. You know now, Yuna said. That is what matters. Vishu stepped forward, his face twisted with conflict. Even if this is true, what does it change? Humans are still primitive. They still have nothing to offer us. Blood connection does not make them our equals. No, Dohan agreed. Blood connection does not make us equals, but perhaps it makes us family, and family does not need to be equal. Family simply needs to care about each other. He looked around the ancient chamber, at the records of a civilization that had sacrificed everything to give their children a chance. The first wanderers did not create us to compete. They created us to continue, to carry their memory forward, to find each other and be less alone in a universe that is vast and cold. He turned to Orith. We do not ask to be your equals. We ask only to be your family. We ask for a chance to learn from you, and perhaps, in time, to share what we know as well. We ask for the reunion that your ancestors and ours dreamed about when they scattered seeds across the stars. Orith looked at the statue of the first wanderer. He looked at the records surrounding him. He looked at the small human diplomat who had traveled across the galaxy to deliver a message that had been waiting for 100,000 years. Then slowly, he extended his hand. Dohan took it. The grip was strange, human fingers wrapped around Velthari digits, two species touching for the first time as kin rather than strangers. Welcome home, Orith said quietly. Lost children of the wanderers, welcome home. In the Chamber of Origins, beneath the weight of ancient truth, the first bridge was built between two branches of a very old family tree. But above them, in the corridors of power, others were already planning to tear that bridge down. 1 year had passed since the revelation in the Chamber of Origins. It had been the longest and most difficult year in Velthari history. Commander Vishu had refused to accept the truth. He gathered around him all those who shared his contempt, nobles and soldiers who could not bear the idea that humans were their kin. They called themselves the Purity Movement, and they preached that the evidence was fabricated, that the humans were manipulators, that the Velthari must remain supreme and alone. For 3 terrible months, conflict tore through the Dominion. Vishu's forces attacked human vessels. They burned the Chamber of Origins, trying to destroy the evidence. They attempted to assassinate High Sovereign Orith for what they called his betrayal of their species. But they failed. Elder Keth, despite his age, became the voice of truth. He traveled to every world in the Dominion, sharing the evidence, speaking the old words, reminding his people of what they had forgotten. The genetic tests were conducted by independent scientists from a dozen different worlds. The results were undeniable. Human and Velthari DNA shared markers that could not exist by chance. They were family. There was no other explanation. Slowly, the tide turned. Vishu's movement lost support as more Velthari accepted the truth. The commander himself was captured trying to flee the capital world. He was brought before Orith in chains, his face still twisted with hatred. "You have destroyed us," Vishu spat. "You have made us common. We were gods, and you have made us merely another species." Orith looked at him with something that might have been pity. "We were never gods, Vishu. We were always just children, lost and alone, pretending to be more than we were because the truth was too frightening to face." He shook his head slowly. "Now we have found our family. Now we are less alone. How is that destruction?" Vishu had no answer. He was taken away to face justice for his crimes. Now, 1 year after Yuna first spoke the ancient words, a new building stood on Aelthora. It was called the Embassy of United Worlds, and it was the first structure ever built by human and Velthari hands working together. Its architecture blended both styles, neither species dominant, both equally represented. Inside, a ceremony was taking place. Yuna stood before the combined assembly. Human diplomats sat beside Velthari nobles. Scientists from both worlds exchanged notes. Children, both human and Velthari, played together in the gardens outside, already forgetting that there had ever been a time when their peoples were strangers. High Sovereign Orith rose to speak. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone from his bearing. In its place was something wiser, humbler, more real. "1 year ago," he said, "a small ship arrived in our space. We laughed at the creatures inside. We called them primitives. We threatened to cage them like animals." He paused, letting the memory settle over the assembly. "We were fools, worse than fools. We were lost children who had forgotten our own family." He turned to look at Yuna. "But those creatures we mocked carried something we had lost. They carried our own history, our own language, our own truth. They brought it back to us freely, asking nothing in return but to be recognized as family." Orith bowed deeply toward the human delegation. Every Velthari in the chamber followed his example, bowing to beings they had once considered inferior. "Today," Orith continued, "we formally recognize humanity as the returned children of the first wanderers. They are our kin, our siblings, our family. Their history is our history. Their future is our future. From this day forward, we walk the stars together." The chamber erupted in applause. Human and Velthari hands clapping together, creating a sound that had never been heard before in the universe. Then Dohun rose. He walked to stand beside Orith, facing the assembly. His voice was calm and strong, the voice of a diplomat who had achieved the impossible. "When we first came here," he said, "we were afraid. We knew we were small and weak compared to your great dominion. We knew you could destroy us with barely a thought. But we came anyway because we believed that the truth was worth any risk." He looked out at the assembled faces, human and Velthari together. "We did not come to conquer. We did not come to compete. We came because our ancestors left us a message that said we were not alone, that somewhere among the stars, family was waiting." Dohun's voice grew stronger. "We were laughed at because we were young. We were dismissed because we were different. But we carried your words in our bones and your stories in our dreams. We never forgot. And now, neither will you." He spoke the final words in both languages, human English and the ancient tongue of the first wanderers. "We are children of the same stars. We are family. And family finds each other, no matter how long it takes, no matter how far the distance." The applause that followed shook the building. Later that evening, Captain Sunho stood on the observation deck of the horizon's edge. The ship was still in orbit, though now it was surrounded by Velthari vessels that served as honor guards rather than threats. The twin suns of Aelthora were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Hana joined him at the window. She looked tired but happy, the kind of exhaustion that comes from achieving something that seemed impossible. "I never thought I would see this," Sunho said quietly. "When I was young, we did not even know aliens existed. Now we are family with an empire that spans 300 worlds." Hana nodded. "The historians will talk about this moment for centuries. The day two lost branches of humanity's family tree were finally reunited." "Do you think the first wanderers knew this would happen?" Sunho asked. "When they seeded our worlds, do you think they imagined we would find each other?" "I hope so," Hana replied. "I hope they looked up at the stars before they disappeared and imagined a future where their children would meet, where we would stand together and remember them." She turned to look at Sunho. "What do you think they would say if they could see us now?" Sunho considered the question. He thought about the ancient ship buried in Earth's ice, waiting patiently for 100,000 years. He thought about the records left behind, the language preserved, the hope that had survived across unimaginable time. "I think they would say something like, 'What took you so long?'" Hana laughed. It was a warm sound, filled with joy and relief and wonder. For the first time since they had arrived in Velthari space, it felt like laughter belonged here. Below them, on the planet's surface, Yuna was receiving her new appointment. She would be the first human to hold a seat on the Velthari High Council, serving as a permanent bridge between two peoples. She accepted the honor with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything. Tiho stood guard beside her, his hand no longer reaching for his weapon. The soldier had learned that some victories were not won with force. Some victories were won with truth and patience, and the courage to speak when everyone else wanted you to be silent. Elder Keth approached Yuna after the ceremony. The old priest's eyes were bright with tears he no longer tried to hide. "Thank you," he said simply, "for returning what we had lost, for reminding us who we truly are." Yuna took his hand gently. "You never really lost it, Elder. It was always there, carved into your pillars, written in your sacred texts, buried in your DNA. You just needed someone to help you remember." Keth smiled. "And now we will never forget again. We will teach the old language to every child, human and Velthari alike. We will build monuments to the first wanderers. We will honor the truth they left for us." "Good," Yuna said. "That is all they ever wanted, to be remembered, to know that their sacrifice meant something." The twin suns had set now. Stars were appearing in the purple sky, thousands of points of light scattered across the darkness. Somewhere out there, other worlds waited. Other children of the first wanderers, perhaps, sleeping in ignorance, waiting to be found. Humanity and the Velthari had found each other, but their journey was just beginning. On the observation deck, Sunho watched the stars and felt something he had never felt before. Not pride exactly, not triumph, something deeper, a sense of belonging that extended far beyond one world, one species, one small corner of existence. They were not alone anymore. They had never been alone. They had simply forgotten for a little while that the universe was full of family waiting to be discovered. The Mudwalkers had reminded them. And nothing would ever be the same.